Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to uh the first revision session that we're doing, right? So we'll just be looking at a Visual C# problems that was given to you by your lecturer, I think a few weeks back, and it was also sent yesterday. So in this revision example, we're required to create a C# application that allows a lecturer to enter individual test marks into a text box, and when the lecturer clicks transfer marks button, each mark is added to a list box, and then after all marks have been entered, the following processing steps take place, right, when the lecturer clicks on process marks, right? So they're gonna calculate the average mark, add exception handling, calculates the highest mark, then use a function, right, to calculate the symbol of the average mark. And then the function must return a string value of a symbol, right? So if it's greater than or equals to 75, it's gonna return A. If it's 70 or 75, it's gonna be B, etc. Right? So the function call must be in the process mark button, right? And then we will then be required to output this, right, into a separate text box in another form, which the lecturer clicks the summary button. All right, so those are the things that we need to do. So let me pause my video and then we can get started, right? So let's just firstly create a project. So I'm going to go to Visual Studio, and then I'm going to go to new project. And I'm going to create a project. So again, I'm going to create a Windows Form application. And then I'm going to give it a name. So let me say ISTN212 revision Prac. And then I'm going to click browse. And then once I've clicked browse, then I'm just going to create a new folder for this session. So I'm going to call this revision Prac. Then click select folder, and then the folder has been selected. And then I'm just going to click OK to create the project. Right. So in the meantime, it's creating. I'm just going to look at the steps. So we're going to start with this part here, where this application allows a lecturer to enter individual test marks into a text box, and when the lecturer clicks transfer marks, each mark is added to a list box, right? So okay, we have our interface here created. So looking at this, I'm trying to see how we can do it, because there are multiple ways of doing this. So we can just create well, I'm thinking of doing it how we did it in the Monday's Prac, but we're not gonna start with the arrays as yet. Maybe we might look at an example, and or maybe you can use it and do it as homework in our next session. But right, we want to create an application that allows a lecturer to enter individual test marks into a text box, and then when the lecturer clicks transfer marks button, each mark is added to a list box, right? So let's do this, right? So we're gonna click a button, right, to enter marks. So let's create a button here. So I'm going to look for a button, and then there is my button. And then I'm going to call this enter marks. I'm going to change the text property to enter marks. Right. So then I'm going to create another form. I'm going to right click the solution name and then go to add, then new item, then get a window. A Windows form, right? So I can just call this form marks capture.cs and then click add. All right, so on this form, as it said, we're gonna have we are gonna have what is this? A text box, right? And we're gonna have a button to confirm. And then let me change the text property to confirm, and then I'm gonna add a label also. And then I'm gonna say enter marks. Right, so then now I've entered the marks, right? So what I'm thinking is, let's just use an array, right? So we're not gonna leave it for next, because anyways, it's part of things that we're looking at here, right? So we're just gonna use a similar approach to what we did, but again, because now there's multiple, as it said here, you're gonna add the marks, and then each mark is then gonna be added to a list box. So it's still in line with what we did in the last practical. Right. So I've created the marks capture form, right, where this form is gonna pop up and you're gonna enter the mark, and then you're gonna click confirm, and then once you've confirmed, then it's gonna go back here, right? And then once it's here, and then we're going to have another button here to transfer the marks. Let's look for a button. So that's going to be button 2. And then I'm going to call it transfer marks. Right. So let's take it a step further. We're going to also use a structure, right? And we're gonna cover that in the next practical, but in the next revision, but we're gonna use a structure, and you'll see what we'll use it for the marks, obviously. Right. So what I'm looking for is a list box. Right. So let me just change my application in terms of how it looks. Right. So this is gonna be the list box here, which is gonna contain the marks. So I'm gonna call that marks. Okay, so we have this here. Right, so I'm gonna double click on this enter marks button. Right, so when I click on this button, what I want to do is I want to show that marks capture form, right? And then the user should enter their marks, and then they're gonna click confirm, right? That's what they're gonna do. So I'm gonna firstly create an instance of the max capture form. So I'm gonna say max capture. My window is still frozen, so just hold on. Yeah, guys, my computer just decided to kick me out of Zoom for some reason. I'm not sure why. Um, it just did the same thing again. So if it does it again, just know that it just kicked me out. So as I was saying, right, we're gonna create an instance of the max capture form. So uh, let me call it its name form capture, right, is equal to new max capture. I'm really not sure what is going on with my computer now, or whether I should restart this thing, because I don't know why it's going slow for some reason. But we're gonna push on. The devil is a liar. Right. So after I've created an instance, right, I'm gonna call that instance, right? So I'm gonna say form capture dot show, so that it appears when this button is clicked, right? Again, I said that we're gonna create an array, right? So that we're gonna capture the students ourselves, right? So um, perhaps what we could have done is we can make it dynamic, right? In terms of the marks of the students that we want, right? So we can make it to be dynamic, not just static, saying that we're going to have only 6 students, right? We can have a pop-up and ask the user how many students do you have, and then they're going to give us the number of students that they have, and then we can then capture those number of students that they've entered, right? So um it's simple, right? So let's just go back to the form one design, and then I'm gonna right click on it and then go to the view code. So basically back where we are, right? So I'm gonna create a structure, right? So I'm gonna say public struct, and then I'm gonna call the structure um student, right? Open and close curly brackets. And then inside the structure, right, I'm going to declare some variables, right? So what do we want in this structure? We actually just want the marks, right, of the students. Sorry. So public string, and then marks, right? If you also wanted the name, right, we can also add the name if we want to. So we could just say uh, public uh, string name, Or could we say student number? Doesn't matter. Let's just leave it as name, right? We can add more if you want, to add more attributes, but let's just use two for this example, right? And then now we're gonna create an array, right? So public um so this array is of type student, right? So we're gonna say public student, open and close curly square brackets, and then we are gonna say give it a name, so we can say student array, right, which is equals to new student, and then we can say for starters we can just declare it as let me just declare it as one, but we're going to overwrite this one, right? So that we just ask the user how many students they have. And then once they've told us how many students they have, then we can then update the array to have that many number of students. It's a bit of a stretch, but let's see, right? So let's go inside now the button one method. So where am I? Oh yeah, I'm gonna go to this form, yeah, for enter marks, right? So when I click enter marks, right, it should pop up that form, right? So I'm gonna go to the marks capture form, and I want to access this label, this text box. I don't really need to change to access this button, but I want to access these two controls, right, from form one, right? So to do that, then I'm gonna select the label, right? Once the label is selected, then I'm gonna scroll down under the design section, right? I'm gonna go to where it's written modifiers, right? And then I'm gonna change that from private to public, right? Once I've changed it to public, now I can access this label from form one, right? I'm also going to do the same for the text box, right? And then I'm going to change it from private to public. All right. So now I've changed the two to be so that I can edit them, right? So what I will do now, I'm going to say when I go to form one, right, and I click enter marks, I want it to ask me how many students do I want to enter, right? So what I'll do is firstly what to do is as I said, we're gonna click this button and then this form should pop up, right? So what I'll do before the form shows, right, I'll say form capture dot label one dot text, right? So I want to change this label to ask the user how many students marks do you want to capture, right? And then they're gonna type in so then right before it shows up, right, we're just gonna change the label to ask the user how many students do they want to capture, right? And then we're gonna show the form. Okay, and then once it's shown and they've typed in the value, right? So they're gonna type in their value and then they're gonna click confirm. Once they click confirm, right, we just wanna hide this form, right? So I'm just gonna say this dot hide, right? To hide the student capture form, right? So once it's hidden, then what I'll do is I'll just let me go back to here, right? After it's hidden, right? And this part has happened, then we want to capture what is in text box 1. So, or the value that is in text box 1. So I'm going to create a variable, which is an integer, and then I'm going to call it num of students is equal to int dot pass, right? And then open brackets. So inside the brackets, I'm going to get the value that the user has typed in, right? In the form capture form, right? So I'm going to say form capture dot text box 1 dot text, right? Once I've typed it in, then now I'll have the number of students, and then I'll just update student array. So now I'll just say student array is equal to new student and then I'm going to say num of students here, and then semicolon, right? So now I've just overwritten the array. So now when it loads, now it's just going to contain these number of students. So if I set 6, it should have 6 students, right? So that's what I'm doing here. Right. And then once this happens, right? Now after we've asked the students how many students did they want to capture, now we can actually capture their marks, right? So to capture their marks, then we're gonna have to run a for loop to loop through the student array, right? For each that students, we're gonna enter their marks, right? I'm just thinking of now. Let's add the name field, right, or text box into the student capture parts, but it's gonna be a hidden text box, which is only gonna show it's only gonna show for that specific marks. Actually, for this part here at the beginning here when we do this. So only gonna show it then. Right, so to do that, let me just select the enter marks and this text box here, right? And just copy and paste the tool right at the top. And then I'm just going to change the label, which is label 2. I'm going to change the text of it to be enter name. And then I'm going to set its visibility to be false, right? So that it's not visible. And then also I'm going to change the text box to visible to be false so that I can't see it when I run this form. All right, so someone is saying they are getting lost. Where did you get lost? You can unmute and speak. Anyways, I'm not sure if you're typing it or what. All right, so for the max capture text box, form, right? I'm just adding the name and the label and the text box. So you can just drag it from the toolbox, right, and paste it here. I just copied and pasted it to just make it simple. And then I changed the visibility to be false, right? So then for both the name, the label, and the text box. Okay, so once you've made that to be invisible, right? So I'm gonna go back to Form 1 design, and then I'm gonna double click enter marks, right? And then I'm gonna be back here, right? So after I've changed the label to the how many marks do you want to capture, I'm just gonna go before it and enter a new line, right? And then I'm just gonna say form capture dot text box 2 dot visible, no, yeah, visible, is equal to true. And also let me say form capture dot label 2 dot text, right? Not dot text dot visible is equal to true, right? I've already set the text of label 2 in the form capture, so I'm not going to change it. I said enter name, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. All right, so yeah, what we're going to start doing, so let me just run it so that you can possibly see what I'm doing so far. So I'm saying we're going to click enter marks, right? And then when we click enter marks, oh yeah, it's going to give us an error here, right? Because of the text box is empty, but it shouldn't be occurring as yet because the form hasn't, well, it showed, but I still haven't typed anything. So this code is a bit rushed. So, okay, it's fine. What I'll do is we'll do it in a different way. So I can just comment this out for now because we have to do it differently. So let's just change that here. We're just going to have 6 students by default, right? So I'm going to comment this out. We're going to look at it later in terms of how we can change this part here. So again, when I click enter marks, right, this is what I want to pop up. But again, as I said, the visibility of the label and this shouldn't be appearing, right? Yeah. So yeah, this here, it's not supposed to be here as yet because I was thinking of something else after I've done this part here to ask the user how many students marks do they want to capture, right? So okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back here to the form design, right? And then let me just see. Okay, we're gonna enter marks and then it's gonna pop up how many students do they want to capture, and then it's gonna show this form, right? And then once they click confirm, so perhaps we can do this code here on this confirm button before this dot hide, right? So what I'll do is I'll just have to say public static for the array so that I can see it in the other form, right? And then, okay, I've set it to 6. Then I'm going to go to the marks capture form and then click confirm button. So when they click confirm, right, I want to capture this. Okay, this is not going to work this way. Thinking of, the ahead. But anyways, okay, let's go back to and simplify things and not complicate things, right? So again, we're going to click this and then they're going to enter the marks, right? So as I said, we're going to run a for loop, right? And which is going to loop through every index of the student array, and then it's going to capture the marks, right? So what I wanted to say is we're going to say for int I is equal to 0, semicolon I is less than student array dot length, right, plus, sorry, semicolon I plus plus, and then open curly brackets. So inside the for loop, this is where we want the magic to happen, right? Where we're going to pop up the form, and then once we popped up the form, then we are going to capture the right details, right? So again, I'm going to say marks capture dot, and this code here, I'll just move it to another part of the button click method, right? Because of what I wanted to do, right? So, but for now, let's just go. Yeah.
So I'm lost. I've got an error in my code. So as you're speaking, I'm trying to figure out what the error was. I'm not able to keep up.
Okay. Can you share your screen? Share your screen, and then we can see.
Here with the public static.
Okay. Put the P to be a small letter and also the S to be small.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
that should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. All right. So again, we're gonna look at this part of the code just now, right? Because I'm trying to firstly set the logic up because of how the system is behaving, right? So we're gonna do this part again. We're just gonna say form capture dialog, right? It's another instance that we're gonna create for specifically for this for loop, right? So I'm gonna say form dialog, then new max capture, and then open and close bracket semicolon. Then we are gonna show this, right? Because it's gonna be capturing the marks, right? So form capture dialog dot show dialog, open and close brackets. So yeah, now when this form shows up, right, they're gonna enter the marks and then they're gonna click confirm, right? And then once they click confirm, then we're gonna capture the marks here, or we're gonna add it to the array, right? So I'm gonna say try and then open brackets, and then after the curly brackets, I'm gonna say catch and then open curly brackets like so. Right. So now what I want to try is I want to try getting the values from max capture from the value that is here, right? And then store it into the array. So to do that, then I'll just say student array, right? At index I dot max, right? And then and again this part here work it should also be this here should also no, it shouldn't be in the array. This should be somewhere else, right? But now since we want to get the marks, right, we're gonna be using it. We're using a for loop, right, to loop through each index of the array because we initialized it at the top here, right? So after we initialized it, then we can just now loop through all the indexes of it and then just set the marks field, right? So now for the marks, what we want to store is the mark that we gotten from the form capture dialog. So I'm going to say form capture dialog dot text box one dot text, right? And then it's going to be an error because marks is it's not supposed to be a string. It's supposed to be, let's make it a double, right? It's supposed to be a double or a decimal. So we're gonna say int dot pass double dot pass, right? And then open brackets and then put this in brackets, right? So now we're gonna capture the marks, right? And then once we've so there's a question, what does pass mean or do? pass mean it's trying to convert. So what it does, it just converts the value that you've put here, which is a string, right, or which is a text. It's going to pass it or convert it into a double, right? So whichever you've mentioned here. If you said int, it's going to convert it to an int. If it's a double, then it's going to convert it to a double. So that's the main purpose of pass. I hope that makes sense. All right. So yeah, so now we've converted the mark, right? And then we've stored it under marks. So this is gonna happen multiple times, right? Well, 6 times, right? Which is the array length, right? After it's happened 6 times, then what we'll do is we'll say here, oh yeah, if there's an error, we're just gonna show a message box. So message box dot show, and then open and close curly brackets. We're gonna say error. Please input correct format and try again. Right, and then I'm gonna go back to the try catch part, to the try part, and then I'm gonna say I is equal to I minus 1, right? So that no, this here shouldn't be in the try part. It should be in the catch parts, right? So that the user will be required to restart this part again if they had an error, right? So now we've dealt with exception handling, right? If we get an error here. Right. So we've captured, this is how we can capture marks. So let me just comment out this part here that I'm going to move to another part of the system so that we can have a consistent layout. So I'm going to add another button to just say enter students, right? Student names, and then they're going to enter student names, and then we're going to have this button to enter student marks. And then after that, when they click transfer marks, then we're going to transfer the marks here, right? So when I click enter marks, you see that this form is popping up, and then it's going to wait for the student, so for the person to enter the marks. So they're going to enter the marks. So they're going to enter 10, click confirm, right? It's going to pop up again. They're going to click confirm. Then again, it's going to happen 6 times, right? So again, let me just do this. And then in the 6th time, you'll see nothing will happen, right? Because now we've captured the marks, right? So it's waiting for us to program this button now, right? So let's go back to form 1, right? So as I said, let's add another button at the top. This button is just going to be enter student names, right? Or number of students. Yeah, number, let's just call it number of students, right? And then these text boxes will be, these buttons will be disabled, right? Because of what to make things simpler, right? So that the system can be easy to interpret. So let me just set this to be disabled, right? So when it starts, right, these buttons should be disabled. So when I click number of students, I want that pop-up to show up, and then the user is going to enter the number of students, and then once they click confirm, then that's when I want to capture the number of students. So when I click this, I'm gonna create another form instead of having one because it's giving me issues. And no, I'm not gonna delete this. Let me just leave it as it is. So let me add another form. So I'm gonna add and then just go to Windows Form and then I'm gonna call this number of students .cs. The naming doesn't really matter. Right. So let's get a label and a text box and a button. Right. And then for the label, I'm just gonna change the text there. So I'm just gonna say actually let me just leave it as it is. I'm gonna change it or let me just change it now. So let me just say number of students. You can still change it in the code behind, so it's the same thing, right? So number of students, and then let me add an S there. And then here for button 1, I'm just gonna say confirm. Right, so once this button is clicked, then I want this form to hide. Right, so I want number of students form to hide when I click confirm. So going back to this form, when I click number of students, I want to capture those details, right, from here. I want to capture this text box text. So to do that, then I'll just say here, I'm going to go to the design and then modifiers. Then I'm going to go to private and then set it to public, right? So that I can access this also with the label. I can change the modifier from private to public. Okay, so now let's continue with what we want to do. So when they click number of students, right, I said that we want the marks capture form to pop up and then to ask the students how many students marks do you want to capture and then show the form, and then we're going to capture these details there. But for the name, this part here, I actually wanted to put it inside here, this part here, so that when they capture their marks, they can also capture the name, right, of the students, right? And then I'm going to change this to form capture dialog, right? And then also this form capture dialog. Okay, so now I've done that. I want to see something. If I don't declare the array here and then just declare it within the code when I click button 3, right? When I click this button here, what will happen? And sometimes you need to experiment with these things. So yeah. Okay, so yeah, what I wanted to do is actually this code here, right? I wanted to add it. The reason why I said the array, I wanted to be a public static array is because I wanted to use it from the number of students form from this form. When I click confirm here, before I hide this form, I actually wanted to just call the form one. So like so form one dot student marks capture. Sorry, form one dot what is the array? Student array, right? So I wanted to say form one is equal to new student and square brackets, and then say integer dot pass, right? Then inside the brackets, then I was just gonna say text box one dot text, and then semicolon. But that isn't gonna work because also the structure itself here, which is the structure here that we declared, is not static, right? So it's not really found. But again, it's not gonna, the static modifier doesn't work. That's why you use a class for this, right? Then it should work accordingly, and then it wouldn't give you this type of error that you're getting here. So right, so since this is the case, right, that's why we were gonna do it the other way around, right? Where we're gonna do it on this form itself. When we click button 3, going back to form 1, when you click the number of students, then when this form pops up, then after it pops up and then they click confirm, then it should go here, right? Where we then gonna capture that number, and then we're gonna initialize the student array. So let me run it, and then obviously it will probably give us an error, right? Where it will just do this, right? Because it automatically just skips this part, and I can put a breakpoint to see what happens, right? So that you can see why is it skipping this part. So like, as you can see, there's the form, and then when you click step into, it's gonna step into and initialize the controls in this form, like as you see. And then now it's gonna show the form. Okay, now I think I see why it's giving the error, right? I was supposed to say here show dialog, right? Because the show dialog, the form will be stuck up until they type in the value of text box 1. Then this part here will happen, right? So I think that's why we were getting that error. So let me just click number of students. You see now it's not crashing. So now when I type in 6 and I click confirm, now I expect the array now to have 6 students that it allows. So it's going to loop 6 times. So that's what I was trying to do earlier. So I just realized it now that I made a mistake here. So you just needed to show dialog, and then now the code should work accordingly. Right. So another thing that we wanted to do, right, that for form 1, right, this enter marks and this transfer mark button should be actually just the enter marks button should be enabled, right? And then once we click enter marks and they enter the marks, then we're going to enable this button here. So let's actually disable, oh, this one is already disabled, so let's enable it. So let's just check the button number. It's button 1. So let me go to num students, and then I'm going to say here button 1 dot enabled is equal to true, right? So yeah, so now since we figured out the error here, right, that was causing the form to not work accordingly, we're gonna actually just copy this code and move it here, but it's fine, right, because we've already created the button. So let's just leave it as it is. It's fine, right? So yeah, they're gonna enter the number of students, and then once the number of students has been entered, then we can enter the marks, and then they're gonna enter the marks, and then we need to make sure that after they enter the marks, this button should be enabled. So let's double click here and then scroll down towards the end after the for loop, and then we're gonna say button it's button 2, right? So we need to make sure button 2 is enabled. So I'm gonna say button 2 dot enabled is equal to true, right? And then let's run it. So let me enter the number of students. So let me just say 1, right? And then I'm going to click confirm, and then you can see now I can get access to this button. Then I'm going to click enter marks. Then I'm going to enter 56, right? And I'm going to click confirm. Also, I'm going to enable that label and that text box so that they can enter their name also, right? And then we can store the name of the individual, and then click confirm. And then once we've confirmed, now you see the transfer marks button is enabled, and then they're going to click transfer mark, and then they can transfer the marks here, right? So again, what we need to do is, let me go to the marks capture form, right? And I said I want to enable both of these things now. The label, right? So set it to be visible, and then also the name also should be visible. The text box should be visible, right? So once it's visible, then go to the form 1 form, and then double click on enter marks, and then scroll down just here in the in this what is this, when the for loop is doing its thing, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say student array at index I dot name is equal to double no, not double, because it's a string, right? So we can just say form capture dialog dot text box 2, right? Remember we called the name text box 2, right? So now we've captured the name, and then we've captured the marks, right? And then so since we done with that, then the next thing that we need to do is we need to transfer the marks. So let's go back to this thing here. We need to code the transfer marks and add the marks to the list box, right? So let me just say here, let me move this to here, and then add another label. Actually not, right? I just realized something, right? So we're just gonna have the marks here, right? We can have another list box, right, on the side where it's just gonna have the name, right? We can just do that for the reason of simplifying things. But yeah, no. Let's do it this way because it's fine. Because we already have an array which stores the name and the thing that we want. So I'm just reading into the situation a bit much. So I'm gonna have this as name, right? And then marks. So we're just gonna show both the name and the marks in the list box, right? So what we're gonna do is let's click on transfer marks, right? When we click on transfer marks, we want to transfer the marks that are in the array to the marks that is in the list box, right? So to do that, then what we need to do is we need to loop through each item in the array, right? And then for that each item, we need to move it or copy it to the list box, right? So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to use a for loop, right, to loop through all the items in the array. So we're gonna say int I is equal to 0, semicolon, I is less than the student array dot len, right? Semicolon I plus plus, right? And then inside the for loop, right? This is where the magic is happening, right? Where now what we're gonna do is we wanna, for each item in the array, we want to store it to the list box, right? Or the marks, right? But I said that we're gonna add the marks and the name, right, into the list box. So to do that, let's create another method. So this is gonna be a void method, right? Again, you can just say public void, and then I'm gonna call it format display, and then I'm gonna take in some parameters inside the method. So it's gonna take in a string, right, which is a name or string 1, right? And then this is gonna be a double, but also let me convert this to a string also, right? Because it's gonna be outputted as a string. So let me not complicate things, right? So this will be marks, right? So inside the method, right, I actually wanna use something. So I'm gonna say here, I'm gonna go up at the top, then I'm gonna say string, then I'm gonna say format string, right? And then equals to a string like so, and then I'm gonna put in two curly brackets, right? The first one is index 0, right? And then in index 0, I actually wanna leave 20 spaces to the right, right? And then for the second item or index 1, right, I want to leave and let me not leave spaces inside this. Let me just put it like so. I'm gonna also leave like 25 spaces, right, to the right. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so now we've created our string, which is gonna be used for zoning, right? And then we created a method here, we've called it format display. So what this method is gonna do is we're gonna output it in a message box, right? So we're gonna say message box.show, and then we're gonna say here inside it, we're gonna say string dot format, right? And then now the format that is we're gonna be using is format string, the variable that I created at the top there, right? Format string. And then the object arguments that I'm gonna have is the name, right? Then comma. The second argument is gonna be marks, right? And then now I've formatted my string. So when this method is called, it's gonna output the formatted string, right? So this here is gonna be outputted, right? To actually, I don't want to show it to a message box. I actually want to store it into the list box. So I'm supposed to say here list box 1 dot items dot add, right? So this is what I wanted to do, but it's not called the list box like this. It's called list box like that, right? So list box 1 dot items dot add, and then what I'm adding is just the string format. And to make things simple for yourself, you can just if you don't want to use the complicated method of zoning, right, you can just output it as a string, meaning that you can just do this here. You can just say listbox 1 dot items dot add, right? inside here, you can just say name, right? Well, the name that you've gotten from the student array. So student array at index I and the dot name, right? And then you could just say plus and then leave some spaces like so, then say plus, then student array at index I dot marks, right? And then close brackets, semicolon, right? That would suffice. It's the same thing, right? This is just being fancy, right? But anyways, right? So since I've already created this method, right, I'm gonna use it. So I'm gonna say format display, right, and then open brackets, and then I'm gonna put in the name, right? And then for the marks, right, I need to just convert it to string, right? Like so. And then now it should be stored as it should convert it, right? So when this method is called, it's gonna take that name and then marks and then output it, right? Here, right? So the name is gonna be here, and then it's gonna leave 20 spaces. Then we're gonna also have the marks, and then which is going to be stored under over 25 spaces, right? And then now we've done that. So let's run it to test if it actually worked, right? So this is the marks capture. Why am I seeing the marks capture form? I think I made a mistake with the form I'm using. Let me go back here. To the number of students, right? I think I'm not using this form. Oh, okay. I think what I did, so when I click this here, I use the marks capture form. That's why. Okay, so even if it's using that form, it's still the same thing. So I can just copy this and then I'm gonna paste it here. Right, and then this here, I'm gonna change that to form capture, and then also that to form capture, and then I'm gonna set the visibility to be false. Right, and then that's fine. So this form here, you can delete it because we're not using it. But so as you can see, right, how many marks do you want to capture? So I'm gonna say, let me just say 2, right? And then I'm gonna click confirm. And then once I've entered that, I forgot to disable this after this button after they've entered the number of students, but it doesn't really matter. And then I'm gonna enter the marks, the name, right? The marks. So let me enter the name. Let me say Jack, and then the marks is 67, and then I'm going to click confirm. Then let me add the next student, so that's going to be Zach, and then Zach got 69, and then I'm going to click confirm, right? So once I've clicked that, then now I want to transfer the marks. So when I click transfer the marks, now you can see there's Jack, and then sorry, there's the names of the people, and then also there's the marks of those people, right? So that's how you transfer the marks, right? So we've done it quite, I kind of complicated it by introducing the arrays, right? You could have just get it in a much simpler way where we don't use an array, just store get the values and store them into a global variable, right? But for the way this exercise is explained, so I just decided to use an array to make things simple, right? So, right, after we've done this, right, after all marks have been entered, so the following processing steps take place when the lecturer clicks process marks. So we need to add another button called process marks, right, which is the system is going to calculate the average mark, right, and then it's going to calculate the highest mark. So let's start with the average mark at first, right? So What we're gonna do is let's go to the design and we're gonna add a button, but let me go back here, right? I wanna change something here. When I click number of students, at the end, right? I wanna disable this button. So I wanna say button 3 dots enabled is equal to false. Right, so that this button is disabled and you can't access it, so that to change this the number of students that you want to add. Also, I'm going to add another button after the process marks button. I'm going to add another button too. So let me copy and paste it. It's button 5. It's just going to be the exit button to just exit the application. Right, so I'm going to change the text property to process marks, right? And then this one is just going to be exit, right? So when they click exit, so this dot close, this will just be to close the form, right? When they click that button, right? For the process marks, let's double click on it. And then once we clicked on process marks, what we want to do firstly is we want to calculate the average mark, right? So we need to add exception handling, right? So to calculate the average, we are gonna have to, let's just use a try-catch statement, right? So we're gonna have to go through all the items, right, in the array, right? And then once we've gone, as we're going through them, we're gonna have a variable that we're gonna store, right, where we're gonna compare if that variable, right, wait, I'm thinking of the highest mark. Sorry. For the average, we're just gonna loop through all the marks, right? We're gonna add them together, and then we're gonna divide by the number of items, of marks that we've got, and then that's how we get the average, right? So to put it into context, we're gonna say 4, and then we're gonna say int I is equal to 0, semicolon I is less than student array dot length, right? Semicolon I plus plus. And then inside there, right, we're gonna say so we're looping through all the items. So before the for loop, right, I wanted to create another variable, and then I'm gonna call it, I'm gonna just say double sum, right, is equal to 0, semicolon. And then now I'm just gonna say sum plus equals to, right, the student array at index I, right, dot marks. So now I'm capturing all the marks, right? So once I've gotten the marks, then I want to get the average, right, of the students. So let me create another variable, which is a double, and then I'm gonna say student AVG. So student average, right? So to get the student average, it's the sum divided by the student array dot length, right? Semicolon. So that's how you calculate the average. And also you can, if you want to duplicate it, sorry, round it off. So you could just say math.round, open brackets, and then semicolon, and then you can just say 2 at the end. Right? Yeah. So if the system gives you an error, right, like when you do this sum divided by student array length, and you get the value 0, what you can do, you can just say, you can put decimal like this in the brackets, like so, right? But in this case, it's a double, so it should give you an error. So you're supposed to say double, right? If it gives you an error, right? When you dividing by something, but you're getting 0 and you're not getting an answer. So this is what you typically do with, this is called implicit casting. So you're implicitly casting it as a double, right? But in most cases, it should be fine. So you don't really need to add double in brackets. Okay, so once you've gotten the student average, and again, this content that we're covering is something that you've covered in the Prac. It's not something new that I'm giving you. So it's all the contents that we've covered on the Pracs and the lectures. Okay, so we've gotten now the student average here. Then next, what we want is to calculate the highest mark, right? And I'm hoping that everyone is with me. If you're left behind, you can just let me know. So I'm going to say message box.show and then open and close brackets, semicolon. Then here, I'm just going to say error. Please make sure you input the correct format, right? So yeah. You can create individual try catches, right? If the code is complex, but yeah, let's just create individual try catch statements, right? To make it simple, so that we can see if you get an error, you know that it's coming from this specific try catch or where it's coming from, right? But it doesn't really matter. You can just put the code in one try catch. All right, so then next we need to calculate the highest mark, right? So to calculate the highest mark, again, what we're gonna do is we are gonna I'm thinking about it. Okay, so we are gonna create a variable, right? And I'm gonna call it it's gonna be a double, right? And we're gonna call it highest, right? And then this highest number is gonna just be containing the first variable in the array, right? So it's gonna be containing the first variable or the first mark in the array, right? Once we've gotten the first mark, which is at index 0, then we can loop through the for loop, and then overrides highest with the mark that is higher than this mark. So we're gonna say for, and curly brackets, and then I'm gonna say int I is equal to 0. You can use J, you can use another character. I just like using I for some reason because it's iterator, right? So I is short for iterator. That's why I like using it. So I'm gonna say student array dot length, right? And then semicolon I plus plus. So inside the for loop, right, what we want to do is, and you don't really need to start at index 1 in this case, right? At index 0, right? In this case, you can start at index 1 because we've already got index 0 here. So we already know that with this if statement, right, that we're going to have here, index 0 will not, okay, so this if statement will always be false. So it's not really necessary that you start at index 0 here, but you can start at index 0. It doesn't matter. It's fine, right? But I'm just going to leave it at index 1. So I'm going to say highest. So if the highest, right, is less than the student array, right, at index I dot marks, right? If the highest variable that we have here is less than the student array at index I mark, then what we're going to do is we're just going to set highest to that mark, right? So that this is going to be our new highest mark, right? Like so. So that's what you do. And then it's going to loop. And then once it's done, it finds the highest mark. Then the for loop will end, right? Then we've gotten our highest mark in this regard, right? After we gotten our highest mark, then we need to use a function to determine the symbol of the average mark. If the function must return a string value of the symbol, right? So we're going to create a method, which is just going to be checking this and then just return the symbol associated with that average mark. Okay, so we're going to do that quickly. Let's just say here message box.show, open and close brackets, semicolon. So we're just going to say error. Please ensure enter correct input, correct format, right? Okay, so now we want to create a method. So we're going to go out of this button click method, so which is after this curly bracket. I'm going to just go after it, and then I'm going to say public string, because it said that it's going to return the symbol, right? A string value of the symbol. So that's why I'm saying string is just something that it's going to return. And then I'm going to say symbol checker. That's the name of this method, right? Then this method is taking in the average mark. So I'm going to take in a double, and it's going to be called a double, which is, I'm going to call it student AVG mark, right? And then now this is where we're going to do the magic, right? You can use a switch statement for this, or an if statement to compare, right? So for my case, I'm just going to use an if statement. You can use a switch statement if you want to, right? As long as the code works, right? That's the main thing, right? So if the student average mark is 75, right? 75 or greater than or equals to 75, then the symbol is A, right? So I'm going to create another variable, which is a string, and then I'm going to call it symbol, right? And then I'm going to just initialize it to an empty string. And then I'm going to say if student average mark, right, is greater than or equals to 75, right? Then in that case, what I want to happen, I want to set symbol, right, to be equals to A, like so. Else, if, open and close brackets, open curly brackets, and then if student average mark, right, is, let's just check. If student average mark is greater than or equals to 70, right, and, right, and the student, and it's less than 75, right? So and student average mark is less than 75, then in that case, the symbol that is gonna be assigned to that student is A, B, right? Then the next one is, if they got a C, it's between 60 and 69, right? So we're gonna say else if open brackets, open curly brackets, then I'm gonna say student average mark is greater than or equals to 60, right? And student average mark is less than 70, right? Then in that case, symbol is equals to C, semicolon. Then else if, because we're not done, we still have a D. For the next one, it's 50 and 16 and 59. So we're gonna say student average mark, right, is greater than or equals to 50, and the student average mark, right, is less than 60, right? In that case, we gonna say symbol is equal to B, right? And then semicolon. And then the last one is less than 50. So you can just say else here because you already know that it's gonna be less than 50, but just to be safe, you can just say else if then you're gonna say student average mark, right, is less than 50, right? Then you're gonna set the symbol to be equals to E, semicolon, right? And then at the end, you need to return the symbol, right? You need to return the symbol so that the method you get the value that is associated with the symbol. So I'm just going to say return symbol at the end, right? Now, in this case, it's going to work accordingly. Now it's going to return the symbol that we want, right? So let me just call this method. And what I'm thinking is I'm actually going to remove these try catches. I'm only just going to have one try catch because it's going to simplify things because of the potential error, right, that we might get. So I'm only going to have one try, and then as I said, I'm removing the other one, and then yeah, and then at the end here, right, I'm just going to call the symbol checker method, right? And then I'm just going to say I'm going to pass in the student average mark. So student AVG, which is this value here, right? Which is this value. And then semicolon. And then remember that it's returning a string. So you need to store that string somewhere, right? So in terms of that, so let's just check. It must be displayed to text boxes in another form, right? Called when the lecturer clicks summary. All right. So we need to store these values, right? So that when the lecturer clicks the summary button, right, the average mark, the highest mark, and the symbol are displayed on separate text boxes, right? So for that, we're gonna we have to declare global variables at the top because this here, right, this part here is occurring on this method, right? And these values are local to this method, and we're going to create another button where we're going to call that button what is it, summary. So we won't have access to these values, so that's why we're going to create global variables at the top, right, so that we can store these values, right? So to do that, we're just going to say here at the top string no, it's not a string. So the first one is the average mark, so it's a double, right? So we're gonna say double, or you can say public static double, right? But it doesn't matter, right? It's fine. But yeah, let me just say public static double, and you can give it a name, the student average mark, right? And then it's gonna be equals to 0, semicolon, right? And then also for the next variables, if you're gonna use these variables from another form, then you can use public static. But if you're not gonna use them in another form, you don't really need to say public static. So I'm just doing it for the sake of if you wanna use it in another method, right? So I'm gonna create another variable, highest student mark, right? Again, it's gonna be equals to 0, semicolon. And then the next variable is the symbol, right? So public static string symbol, mark symbol, right? And then it's going to be equals to 0 and then semicolon, right? So now I have these three variables that I'm going to store, right? And then they're going to be displayed in another form, right? Oh, this is a string, so it has to be inverted commas, right? So that's fine, right? So now we can scroll down to here, right? And then we can just edit these values. So we're gonna say for the student average mark variable, right? It's gonna be equals to the student AVG, right? Which is the value that we had here. And I can just move this code next to it so that you are not too confused, right? So we're gonna store the student average to the global variable, right, that we have for the average mark. And then for the highest mark, we're going to do the same, right? We're going to say highest student mark is equals to highest, right? Semicolon. Now, the global variable is going to be consisting of the highest mark, right? And then also here what we could have done for this one, we could have also gotten the position, right, of the highest mark or the index of the highest mark. So we could have just created another variable here, so called it highest position, right, is equal to 0 by default initially. And then if this part happens, then you were just gonna say highest position is equal to I. Now you have the position of the highest number, right? If you wanted to use that for something, right? So then for the symbol, so I'm gonna say mark symbol, right? Which is the global variable that I created, which accepts a string, right? Which is now we're just passing in this symbol checker method, which is just gonna return the symbol associated with the student average mark, right? Okay, so now we've gotten all the variables that we need, right? So now it's a matter of now outputting this, right, into separate text boxes in another form, right? Called when the lecturer clicks the summary button, right? So let's create another form, right? We can, okay, I'm not gonna use this one. Let me just create another form. So I'm going to go to add, right? And then just scroll up to Windows Form, right? And then from there, I'll just create the name. I'm going to call it summary form. And in one letter, right? Don't leave spaces. Then I'm going to click OK, add, right? And then it's going to add the form. And then now I can just drag a label. So I'm going to have 3 text boxes, right? A label and 3 text boxes. So let me just drag them. like so. And then I'm just gonna resize this text box and then select both the text box and the label, then just copy and paste. That's number 2, and then number 3. Okay, so label 1, that's gonna be the student average mark, right? Then the second one is the highest mark. Then the last one is the symbol, right, of pass. Right. So now we've gotten that. So yeah, so this is gonna be a bit confusing. The symbol is the yeah, it's symbol of the average mark. So okay, what was confusing, right, is this, right? I'm gonna move the highest mark after the symbol pass, right? So this should be like this, so that you know that it's associated with that, and then the highest mark is just gonna follow that. Okay, so now we've gotten this, right? And again, I'm gonna make these text boxes to be accessible from the other form, right? So that I can just initialize them from the other form, right? Rather than setting this up in the form load method, but you can't do that. I'll show you. Right. So, but let's start with selecting the text box here, right? The first one, go to the properties, look for design section, and then go to modifiers, then change the modifier from private to public. And then select the symbol of pass, right? Do the same thing, change the modifier to public, then the highest mark, change it from private to public, right? So once you've changed all 3 text boxes to be accessible from other forms, then now you can go back to form 1, right? And let me just go to the design, right? So we're gonna add another button, right, onto this form. So let me resize the form. And then I'm gonna paste it here. Right, so this one, this button, I'm gonna change it to be called, the text property to be called summary, right? And then I'm gonna double click on this summary button, right? So you can just double click on it, and then once you've double clicked on it, then what I want to do is I want to load that form, right? But before I load it, I also want the variables, you know, to be stored, right? So I will set this up. So I'm gonna call the summary form, right? So summary form, and then I'm gonna say form. I'm gonna create a variable name, right? You can say something, form summary, whatever, right? Is equal to new summary form, open and close brackets, semicolon. All right, so again, what we wanted to do is that when we click the summary button, right, we want to show the summary form, right? So we're creating a new instance of the summary form, right? And we've called it form summary. And then what we wanted to do is to then, let me just click on summary form. So I wanted to have text boxes and labels on this form that are going to be taking in or where we're going to output or the average mark, the highest mark, and the symbol, right? So before I cut off, so I had some of this, so let me just redo it quickly. Right. Text box. Then I'm just gonna move it, resize it, sorry. All right, so I'm selecting both the label and the text box, both, just copy them and then paste them, right? And then I'm just gonna change the label, the first one to student average mark. And then for this one, I'll just call this the symbol of pass. And then I'll say this is the highest mark, right? So that's text box 1, text box 2, and then text box 3. Let me just change the names. So I'm going to change the name of this text box to the first one to the student AVG mark TXT, right? And then I'm going to change this one symbol pass TXT. And then the last one, I'm just going to name it highest mark TXT, right? And then again, we said that the modifiers should be set to public, right? So just make sure that it's the modifiers are set to public. Right, so once that's done, right, you need to then go back to the form 1, right? I'm going to double click the summary form button. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say form summary. Form summary, and then dot the student average mark dot txt dot text. That's going to be equals to the average mark variable that we created here at the top, right? The student average mark, which is a global variable. So let's just then call it, right, student average mark, right? That's a field that you declared at the top of this form. And we need to make sure that we say dot to string, right, to convert it to a string. All right. And then once we've done that, then the next thing we need to do, we also need to call the form summary, and then we want the what is this, the second mark, which is the symbol of pass, right? So you're gonna say dot symbol pass dot txt dot text is equal to symbol, I think I called it symbol, mark symbol, right? So mark symbol dot text, not the text, dot to string, semicolon, right? Remember that we declared mark symbol here, right? And then the final variable that we need to also set up for or show in the form summary form, right, is the highest mark txt, right? Dot text is then equals to highest mark, student mark, right? Dot to string, open and close brackets. And then this variable, again, we declared it here at the top, right? As a global variable or a module level variable. All right, so after that, then we are gonna just then click on, let's just click on, oh, sorry, we're gonna show the form. So form summary dot show, open or show dialog, right? So open and close brackets, semicolon, right? So it pops up, it doesn't close, right? So now we've set that up. Then let's just go to the form, summary form, and then we can just click from here. We can add a button, right? And then I'm going this for this button, I'm just gonna name it OK, right? Or maybe you can name it print, you can have a print button, whatever. But for now, I'm just gonna have an OK button. Then I'm just gonna double click on it. Then the only thing I'm gonna do here is just to close this form when the person clicks OK, right? So going back to the summary form, okay, yeah, I've set this up. So we can actually just run it now to test what we've done. So I'm gonna wait for it to load. Uh, Visual Studio is still thinking, so just give it minutes or so to get itself prepped to run the application. Right, so now it's finally started, right? We also need to set these buttons to be, these two buttons to be disabled. Let me just stop it and then do it now. We're only gonna process the marks after when they would also we're gonna enable this process marks after this button has been has transferred all the marks, right? So we should say here also going back to the design, I'm gonna set process marks to be disabled. So enabled is gonna be set to false, and also the summary form, the summary button is gonna be set to false. And then I'm gonna double click the process marks button, and then towards the end, right, I'm gonna just set the the process mark, but the process marks button to be enabled, right, when I click on transform marks. I'm just trying to see where this is to make sure that I'm not in the wrong area. So double click on transform marks. Okay, this is button to click. All right, so I'm gonna just type here. Let me check the name of process marks. It's button 4. So button 4 dot enabled is equal to true, right? So now we can access this button, and then I'm gonna go to the design again, and then when we click process marks, right, I want this button to be enabled, right? So then I'm gonna just say here button 6 dot enabled is equal to true, semicolon, right? And then it should be fine, right? So let's just run it and then see. All right, so now all these are disabled. So let's enter the number of students. How many student marks do you want to capture? Let's just say 3, and then I'm going to click confirm, and then I'm going to be required to enter the marks. So let me just enter the name and marks, right? I'm going to enter John, and then they got 69. Then enter, it's going to pop up again, enter another name, Jack. Then enter a mark, and then the final name, I'm going to say Zach, then that's 80, right? And then I'm going to click confirm. Once I've clicked confirm, right, now I'm going to be required to then transfer the marks, right? So also I'm going to have to disable this button after I've done this process. But anyways, I'm going to click on transfer mark, right? And then you'll see that the marks appear, right? And then on the list box, then I'm going to click process marks, right? And then the marks are going to be processed. And then now you're going to see that the summary button is enabled. Now I can just click on summary, and then you can then see the marks, right, that are here, right? So yeah, let me just start from here. I also want to make these text boxes not editable, right? So just read only. So I'm just going to select the text box, then go to the properties and look for read only. Then I'm going to set it to true, right? So that it's read only. They can't edit this. They can only read it, right? So I'm going to do the same for the rest of the text boxes, and then that's fine, right? And then again, as I said, after I click enter marks and the student has entered their marks, I want to make sure that this button is disabled, right? So I'm going to say button 1 dot enabled is equal to false, right? And then I'm going to go back to the design also for transfer marks, right? I also want it to be disabled. So I'm going to say button 2 dot enabled is equal to false, right? Semicolon. And then do the same for process marks, right? And then make sure that it's disabled. So it's button 4 dot enabled is equal to false. And then that should be it, right? With this, but oh yeah, then summary button also, I'm just gonna disable it, right? So button 6 dot enabled is equal to false. Once that's done, then what I can do is I can actually set this button here, right? The number of students after they've clicked summary to I can enable it, but then if I enable it, I just have to make sure that I just clear the array, right? So what I'm saying is, but maybe you might not need to even clear it because it's gonna be overwritten by the new number of students. So what I'm saying is we're gonna set this button to be enabled. So saying button 3 dots enabled is equal to true, right? And then let me just run it. So let me just enter number of students. I'm just gonna enter 2. Then let me just enter their name and marks. right? Then I'm going to click confirm. Then I'm going to click transfer marks, right? And you see the marks have been transferred. And then I'm going to click process marks, right? So once I've clicked process marks, the marks has been processed. And then I'm going to click summary. And then now you're going to see the marks appear and I can only read them. I can edit this. Then I'm going to click OK. And then again, you're going to see summary is going to be disabled, right? And then I forgot to clear this. We can also clear it. And then you can click on number of students. And then I can say 1 this time and then click confirm and then enter the marks, right? And then I can say Jack. And then they got 76 and then I can click confirm. Then I can click on transfer mark and you can see it's added that mark, right? And then I can say summary and then I can click OK, right? So let me just clear the list box, right? So list box 1 dot items dot clear, open and close brackets, semicolon, right? And then we can run it. So let's say 2. And then I'm going to enter the names, right, and marks, and then enter the second one, then confirm, and then I'm going to transfer the marks, and then you can see the 2 marks. Then I'm going to process the marks, then I'm going to click summary, and then now you're seeing the summary. Then I'm going to click OK, and then you can see the list box is cleared. Now I can say number of students. Let me just say 1, and then I'm going to enter the marks. And then enter their marks. And then click confirm, and then I'm going to click transfer marks, and you're seeing the marks, and then I'm going to process, then I'm going to say summary, and then you're seeing it here. All right, and then I'm going to click OK and then exit, right? So yeah, that is that application, right? So you, in the questions that we've covered from this section here, have been testing your understanding of the various sections that we've done in the previous precs that we've gone through in the previous weeks. So we looked at variables, right? Creating a variable, like, so here's a variable name, and then this is the variable type, right? As you're seeing here. And then you can see that we're declaring a new form, right? So we also looked at processing data, where we transferred, right, marks, right, from an array, right, and then we stored that data into a list view, right? We extracted the name from the array and the marks, right? And then we outputted all those marks into a list box from an array, right? We also use decision structures, right? Using if else statements, right? You could have also used a switch statement if you wished, right? But in my case, I just decided to use the if statement, right? Then also we use looping, right? Which is we used a for loop, right? To loop through an array of items to so that we can do our various processing, right? Then also we used multiform applications where we had we opened up new forms, right? So for example, as you're seeing here, we opened up another form and then we added text to it, right? And we also retrieved some text from a form with the marks capture form, right? We also captured form. So we used the multiform application. And then we also did some exception handling where we had try catch statements to check if there is no error in the data capturing. So like when we captured the data here, we use the try-catch statements to make sure that the marks that are being captured are in the appropriate format, right? So that brings us to the end of this practical revision section, right? And hopefully it gave you a sense in terms of the things that will be covered in a test or an exam. Again, it would be more written, but again, you need to understand the logic, right? So that even if you're asked a question, you can write down the answer, right? If you have any queries, feel free to let me know. You can send me an email in my email address, or when you can request a consultation if need be. So if there are any queries, feel free to let me know. If not, you may feel free to exit the session. Cheers, guys.